I'm Chris Perry, and I'm the External Communications and Marketing Manager here at Dallas Love Field. Welcome to this podcast episode of Love Field Stories that focuses on human trafficking. Dallas Love Field is the airport of the city of Dallas and the people of North Texas. It is our responsibility to create a safe and welcoming environment. We do this by adding measures to slow the spread of COVID-19, ensuring TSA security protocols, hiring customer service staff who speak multiple languages, and many other initiatives. Despite hosting only domestic departures and arrivals, Dallas Love Field reflects the diversity and cosmopolitan nature of our sprawling city and is a connection to destinations around the globe. The mantra ingrained in our airport staff and the traveling public is see something, say something. Over the past 20 years of air travel, almost anyone who has stepped into an airport knows those four words. More recently, see something, say something has been extended to more than just airport security. Each year, nearly 25 million people around the world are estimated to be victims of human trafficking. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children saw a 97.5% increase in online enticement in 2020 as compared to 2019, showing that human trafficking increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what role do airports, such as Dallas Love Field, have in the battle against human trafficking? 80% of international trafficking victims cross through official border points, such as airports and border crossings. Nearly 75% of labor trafficking victims say they arrived in the United States via airplane, and another 38% say they traveled on an airplane at some point during their exploitation. Dallas Love Field, its staff and passengers, can make a difference by being prepared to see something, say something, and reporting possible instances of human trafficking to local law enforcement authorities. To bolster its commitment to stopping human trafficking within its walls, Dallas Love Field has partnered with BEST, Businesses Ending Slavery and Trafficking, for its Not Alone campaign, which focuses on aviation, maritime, and mass transportation. During the month of January specifically, which is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month, Love Field is running an awareness campaign on social media and with signage throughout the airport terminal to educate passengers about how they can aid in the fight against human trafficking and implore everyone to see something, say something. Our Dallas Love Field staff are also completing BEST's Flight to Freedom training, so we are equipped with the tools to spot possible human trafficking. It takes all of us to end human trafficking, and ensuring that passengers and staff are aware and properly trained are the first steps. Today, on our Love Field Stories podcast, we are joined by two experts on human trafficking and how airports can play a role in stopping it. Kevin Connelly and Rebekah Covington are corporate relations managers at BEST and leaders of the Not Alone campaign. Their perspective on this important issue is harrowing, enlightening, and informative. We hope you enjoy their conversation, and next time you are traveling through Dallas Love Field or any other airport, you will be better prepared to spot the signs and see something, say something about potential human trafficking.
Thank you to Dallas Love Field Airport. I'm Rebekah Covington. I'm the Corporate Relations Manager at Businesses Ending Slavery and Trafficking. And what I do at BEST is a lot of outreach. I work specifically in the maritime sector and some of our other industry-specific sectors doing trainings and outreach. I also work in our Safe Jobs Collaborative, signing on businesses to help survivors of trafficking find sustainable employment opportunities.
And hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Connelly. I'm the Corporate Relations Manager as well at BEST. I focus on the hospitality and aviation industries. So I facilitate a lot of our trainings, both online and in person, for hotels, for motels, and for airports and airlines as well. And I really try and talk to a lot of different industries and help the employees, the owners, the managers, understand their specific role in preventing and combating human trafficking.
Yeah, me and Kevin definitely partner in this work. It's exciting work that we're able to do. I want to share a little bit about the work that BEST does and who we are. We're a Seattle-based nonprofit. We really focus and operate on 4 pillars. We do awareness, training, consultation, and policy implementation. And we also have a Safe Jobs Collaborative. So our trainings, we build industry-specific trainings for aviation, maritime, hospitality. We also train transit and insurance companies, specifically private sector and government sector, to get human trafficking training into these places, so that the employees are trained on how to identify and properly respond to a human trafficking situation, and to really just understand what trafficking is, what the federal definition is, what they need to look out for, because employees can really make a difference in preventing this crime. We do awareness raising. So this year, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but we were able to launch the Not Alone campaign. We got funding from Washington State to specifically make a campaign that helps survivors of trafficking, self-identify and seek help. And then being able to partner with businesses, once they're trained, we also have human trafficking policies, anti-trafficking policies that these businesses are able to implement to help, keep their business a safer space for employees and protect from legal liability and so on. And then our Safe Jobs Collaborative, I actually started at Best working in the Safe Jobs Collaborative and moved on to working with Maritime. But what we do is we kind of act as a bridge in between social service agencies in our community and businesses in our local community. And we build these relationships so that survivors of trafficking, at-risk youth, opportunity youth, have the ability to find sustainable employment opportunities, and not just that, be able to grow in those positions. So we've partnered with like 30 plus businesses in the community. It's really been amazing to see the support. And also on the nonprofit sector side, just the participants able to be placed in these positions of employment. So yeah, it's really been amazing.
So nowadays, we've seen actually a large spike in human trafficking due to COVID. So, we really feel like now is a more important time than ever for airports to train their employees and their vendors. And we feel this way because so many victims are trafficked through airports. There's a lot of studies done, particularly from the International Labor Organization, that found 80% of trafficking victims in the U.S. Were brought in by an airplane, through official border entry points. So a lot of times these aren't, people have this misconception that folks are being smuggled over the border. And while that can certainly happen, that's not what we're seeing on the ground. The service providers and the government is seeing thousands of people trafficked by airplane every year. And so airport employees are really uniquely positioned to interact with these individuals. Particularly, some of the translators who work at the airport, some of the folks who work at information services, but especially janitorial services. We've heard from a lot of survivor experts who say that they're not very comfortable to, talk to a flight attendant because they're not by themselves, or talk to police or security because they're out in the open. But there's actually this unique position in the restrooms for that conversation to happen. So for that reason, it's really important to have all employees at the airport trained to spot these crimes. And so what makes our training a little bit different from others out there is that we use storytelling. Our executive director, Dr. Bretman, came from higher education and was really interested in creating trainings that spoke directly to adults, but were also very effective and got the message across. So we utilize storytelling from survivors, survivor experts, prosecuting attorneys, law enforcement, airport managers, flight attendants. We really try and represent as many different perspectives as possible, because this crime really impacts so many people in a lot of different ways. So for us, it was important to have this really as interactive as possible, and to be hearing stories and to be hearing from folks and professionals, who are in your own industry, who have the same titles as you, who speak the same language as you. We find that really important for folks who can, come away from a training saying, okay, I actually know what to do now. And if this does happen, I have, these tools to work with.
So many times I've been asked, how does human trafficking happen and who does it happen to? Is it happening in our communities? And the reality is that it is. It's not something that, we see on a daily basis. And so I just want to share a little bit about my story. And, I growing up was kind of like the girl next door. I played sports. I was on the basketball team. I was really involved in my community. And during my junior year, I had something traumatic happen to me that kind of gave me a hard time throughout my senior year. And my parents didn't like that I was acting out and acting different, but I didn't really want to tell them what had happened to me because I was ashamed. And so moving through my senior year, they ended up kicking me out of the house. So after I graduated, I really had nowhere to go. And so I ended up couch surfing, on friends' couches. And within, I would say, about a 72-hour period, I ended up, becoming a victim of human trafficking. I didn't know that at the time. I had a friend who had been manipulated, and the trafficker, used her to kind of bring me into that situation. And so, through lies and manipulation, telling me I have, this distribution job of like selling CDs, something that you can help with. That was, I looked at that and was like, well, I don't really have a job. I don't have, my basic needs aren't being met. I don't have anywhere to live. So yeah, I'll move in with you. This sounds like an opportunity, to do something with my life and, at least have a safe place to stay is what I was thinking. And so I moved in, and it was, that distribution company didn't exist. And then we also have an escort service, and it just went into different lies. You don't have to have sex. We just, it was just a lot of manipulation and lies throughout that time. And so over the course of a 2-year period, I ended up being trafficked across state lines, from Texas to Nevada, throughout Washington state. And I just remember I was flying to Texas. We're on one of the airlines. And I was flying with a girl that I didn't know very well. There was probably 5 of us together. The trafficker didn't fly with us, because he knew that if he was flying with us and there was that element of control over us, that someone might possibly say something. So he knew what he was doing. So me and 5 of the girls were on the flight off to Texas to be trafficked over there. And one of the girls that we were with that I barely knew, she was deathly afraid of flying. So the whole flight, she was just freaking out on the back of the plane, and the flight attendant would walk up to her and, say, "Are you okay?" But she was surrounded by, 4 other girls who were also being trafficked, who, if she tried to say something, maybe we would tell on her because we were afraid of what might happen to us if she left. And so she didn't say anything, but, I was sitting in that moment, and I just remember thinking, like, why is this girl freaking out? And I look back today, and it's like, I'm sure it wasn't just the anxiety of flying. This girl barely knew us. She was being trafficked to another state. Immediately as soon as we got there, she ended up leaving and running and finding safety for herself. But if that flight attendant, would have been able to separate her from us, because we were answering questions for her, these are some of the red flags that people might see too. If someone's answers might sound scripted, or someone's answering for you and that individual is unable to answer for themselves. And so if that flight attendant maybe would have had human trafficking training, and this was 17 years ago, so I don't think as much of that existed back then, but there's a potential that she could have separated that victim from the group that she was in, so the flight attendant could then maybe ask a little bit more probing questions, and potentially be able to help that woman. And she was able to get out and seek help herself. But I was stuck in that for over the course of 2 years. And I remember there was another time that we were flying to another state, and the trafficker would constantly, get on the phone and just give us anxiety and yell. And one of the girls was just visibly, crying and just not okay at the airport. you know? And so many times we go to the airport and, you know, we're just in our tunnel vision. You know, we've got to get to our flight. We've got to get our bags, and we're not really paying attention to our surrounding as much. You know, we're not saying hello to the person next to us. And so if people are trained, you know, the public, employees, I mean, anyone within an airport facility, specifically, you know, the employees, you know, like Kevin said, janitorial, flight attendants, just anyone that could come across a potential situation. If they were trained just to, you know, be able to walk up to someone and say, you know, are you okay? Or do you need help? You know, even just that acknowledgement that that person's human and they're going through something, even if you're not able to pull the person out of that situation in that moment, you're placing, you know, you're kind of placing, how do I say this? Like, I can't think of the word, but you're giving that person a little like glimmer of hope that someone cares. You know, you may not be able to pull them out of the situation in that moment. You know, we all want to have that, like, I want to save you thing, but just letting that person know that there's someone out there who cares, you know, because trafficking victims so many times are so isolated and they don't get that interaction with other people. It can give them hope that there's someone out there that can help, you know. And I ended up being able to exit my trafficking situation through the help of family and friends. And it was a long road, you know, to recovery. But I just remember, you know, there were so many modes of transportation that were used to traffic all of us. And the airport was one of the major ones.
Rebekah, I'm just trying to think through, you know, for folks who do work at an airport, who are trying to think through other ways of intervention, right? So there's only so much you can do especially if you ask someone, you know, do you need help? And they say no, but you can see they're clearly in distress. And in your story's case, this young woman, you know, wasn't taking any assistance from the flight attendant because of the other women around her. And I'm just trying to think through, you know, if the airport had a protocol, right? If that flight attendant really felt like something was wrong, do you feel like there's a secondary person at the airport who could follow up with that woman in a way? Or does it get too complex? I mean, you could, because I'm thinking through, like, I brought up the bathroom story because a survivor expert was talking about how that would be the place where she would tell someone that something was happening. And I just wonder if there would be a situation like that where the flight attendant could, you know, speak to someone in the airport, not law enforcement, because I don't know if that would be too obvious, but security or someone who could then try and speak to that girl as you were walking through the airport again. Do you feel like that would be too complicated?
No, I think that is what should happen. You know, if a flight attendant thinks that there's a situation, I think that she should, you know, even if it doesn't end up being a trafficking situation, it may be. So she could call someone on the other side. And one of the things is you really want to separate that person from their trafficker or someone that has that element of control over them. So making up some kind of excuse saying, you know, we need you to come, you know, your bag got held up. Can you come with us and take a look at this? You know, everyone else needs to just stay here. That's our protocol. Whatever it kind of takes to separate that person from who they're with, to be able to just talk to them and have an honest conversation. And that person may disclose that they're a victim of human trafficking.
Yeah.
And some of the red flags, you know, to look out for in an airport, like if someone's flying with an individual or individuals that are dressed really nicely, you know, and then they're with a much younger person or a person their age. I guess age doesn't really have to be a factor, but maybe they're not dressed as nicely. You know, they may not have access to their ID, their passport, their phone. Someone may be holding that for them. Like Kevin said, you know, there may be elements of control. You may even see injury or physical abuse. A person may be confused or not know where their destination is that they're going because someone's manipulated, you know, them to get on a flight. Situations like that have happened in airports.
Yeah, and we try and keep when we're training folks to identify and respond to training, to trafficking. We really try and focus on behavior. There's a lot of, especially nowadays, still in 2022, there's a lot of folks who identify cases of trafficking, based on age, based on race, based on gender, based on sexual orientation. And as Rebekah just mentioned, we try and break down our indicators through behaviors. So through control, through distress, through confusion being, maybe you're not sure where you are. Maybe the employment contract you signed is not what you believed it to be, or you're working an entirely different job altogether. And then sex buying. So sex buying can always be an indicator of trafficking, because study after study that we see finds that the vast majority of folks in the sex trade are there against their will. They're forced, frauded, or coerced to be there. So those kind of four things are some of the main behavioral indicators that we focus on. We do offer airports and airlines, a much longer list that they can review and they can have their employees look at. But we find that it's much easier to identify based on, looking at someone's behavior rather than their physical characteristics. We also do a lot of work with hotels, and we see, hotels can be very reluctant sometimes to report a case of trafficking because they don't want a lawsuit. And so we always tell them, if you're worried about that, just focus on the behaviors. It's very rare for a hotel nowadays to get sued because they accidentally, misidentified a case of trafficking based on someone's behaviors. So that's a point that I want to stress that we include in our training, and that we really try and get folks to understand when they're kind of, looking at this issue. We still have some time, Rebekah. I wonder if we should back up a little bit, because you didn't really talk about the Not Alone campaign very much yet, did you?
Yeah, I'd love to touch on the Not Alone campaign. So Not Alone is a campaign that we recently launched at Best. We received Washington State funding to put a campaign together. And myself, as a survivor of trafficking, I was thinking about the things that we could do to help survivors, and we've seen so many campaigns in the past that, are more geared towards the public. So see something, say something, right? It goes along with what we've been saying, for employees to get educated and all of that so that they can identify, look at the red flags and all of that. But we wanted to be more focused on survivors and people experiencing a trafficking situation. And so this campaign is unique in that we have worked with survivors of trafficking to develop messaging and visuals that will speak to someone who could be in a situation like that, so that they have the ability to self-identify and to seek help. So we have the National Human Trafficking Hotline number on there, and we have the messaging, saying you are not alone. There is help out there. There's people who can help. So on the sex trafficking posters, we have like visuals of advocates who, have been through, a trafficking situation. It's depicting that, when you call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, they connect you with the local resources. So you'll be connected with an advocate who will then meet with you, talk to you, and just ask, what your needs are and what resources they can provide to people. So this campaign is not only throughout Washington State, obviously, but across the nation. And we've had like 60 plus people sign on to this campaign and be a part of making a difference in the lives of people who are being trafficked.
Yeah, we've had airports, seaports, transit authorities, all different kinds of transportation organizations throughout the state of Washington really came together for this campaign. And I think, one of the things that Rebekah did really well was that the messaging is very empowering, and the imagery is really empowering as well. And so I think a lot of times when you see campaigns for human trafficking, there's chains, there's bars, It's this very negative sort of scary images in a lot of ways that sort of freak people out. And that's just not the way that trafficking really works, right? Like force and that sort of slavery in a certain way that it's portrayed is not often how we see trafficking today. So I think Rebekah did a great job in finding really empowering imagery and the language that we used as well, I think really helped bring the point home of helping folks see this and understand that it could be happening to them. Because in the past, I think there's been some great human trafficking awareness campaigns, and they talk about human trafficking survivors, but a lot of survivors don't understand that they're being trafficked when it's happening to them. They just think, oh, I'm just in a bad situation, or my boss is being really unfair to me. A lot of folks don't know what human trafficking is, but people do know what it is to be alone. And so when you hear those words and you see those words, I think that has a really impactful response for a lot of folks.
Exactly. When I was being trafficked, I wouldn't have known to tell someone that I was a victim of human trafficking. I thought that I was doing something, that I shouldn't. I was ashamed for it. I didn't really know who to turn to or talk to. And if I would have heard those words, "You are not alone and there's a way out," it would have helped me to believe that, because I didn't believe that. All I had is threats against my life or my family. And I didn't feel like I had the ability to even reach out to anyone to tell them what was happening to me. And I would have explained it in a very different way, not "I'm being trafficked." And that's why the imagery on the posters is so important. Even looking at the labor trafficking posters, we have a depiction of someone withholding a document and a phone from someone. And a lot of times that's what traffickers will do. So people can't escape. If they don't have access to their ID, how can they, get on an airplane again or call someone to go get help? And so the messaging and the visuals, we were able to, like I said, talk to survivors who said that that's what would help them. And I know that's what would have helped me too.
Yeah, there was a large trafficking case that happened a few years back where about 1,000 folks from outside of the U.S. were trafficked into the U.S. For numerous positions. Many of them had college degrees. They were all educated. And they were lied to about the situation, and they were forced to work in hotels and motels, cleaning the rooms. And the way that they were kept in that situation was a number of things, but the main one was that they were charged exorbitant amounts for their housing. So they actually weren't making any money, and the traffickers made it so that they would not have enough money to buy a flight back. And then what they did is they waited for their visa to run out. And so now not only do they not have money, but now they're undocumented and they're working in the US illegally. And so there wasn't any violence happening. There wasn't, any major control. It was just that psychological control of what are you going to do, and a lot of folks who come over from other countries don't understand our laws here. They don't have the same relationships with law enforcement that some of us do. So it can be really difficult for folks to get out of those types of situations for all of those reasons and more. So I think the most important thing that airports can do is train their employees. Most folks on the airlines already have training. But airport employees, airport vendors do not in most airports. So we have that training. We can provide that training for folks. We actually work with another airport in Texas, and they recently went through training. And just a few months back, one of their security guards pulled someone over just outside of the airport, noticed a couple red flags, felt like some things were off, asked the right questions, and it turned out that this actually was a sex trafficking situation. So, really quickly within implementing training, we saw some really great results. And thank you again to Dallas Love Field Airport for all the training that you've done for your employees and your role in participating in the Not Alone campaign. If you'd like to learn more about BEST and how you can prevent human trafficking, go to bestalliance.org. And you can check out every episode of Love Field Stories wherever you get your podcasts.
And that does it for us. So thank you all so much for joining us on the Love Field Stories today.
Thank you, Kevin and Rebekah. Thanks to all our viewers and listeners. You can listen or watch every episode of Love Field Stories on our Facebook or YouTube page, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And remember, if you see something,